As an expert in product testing and product experience, we have many clients who ask us to explain what consumers like and dislike in their products, and to explain what drives their behavior and choices. And up to now, we failed explaining those preferences or choices with, let's say, traditional variables like age, gender, or consumption habits, or variables related to consumption like the most used brands or the places where they shop. We hardly found some explanations with those variables about the differences in liking and in choices. So that's why we thought that maybe more individual traits, let's say more individual variables like your personality or what motivates you, or the way you structure your life every day, would maybe be more relevant to explain their choices in their daily life. So that's why we investigated the, let's say, social psychology of consumers. Well, the test is based on psychological scales. One scale is measuring one psychological disposition, let's say. I wouldn't say psychological profile, but let's say one trait. So consumers, they have to answer, like in a personality test, they have to answer several sentences, several items on a response scale. And based on the answer they give to every item of the scale, we calculate a score for every respondent on every given scale. And according to this score, we can, let's say, classify people in a low, medium, or high level for each investigated psychological scale. Yeah, so we have for the moment 15 scales. They're most of them coming from the social psychology English literature. And for example, one is measuring the affect intensity. So it measures the intensity with which you live your emotions, either positive or negative, in your daily life. Are you someone who lives very intensely, who is very emotional, or are you someone more neutral, more serene? We have scales covering more social dimensions, like the social comparison scale, differentiating people who need to have the opinion of other people, who need to compare themselves to other people before choosing products, for example, from the ones who don't care about what people think about them. And one last example is more on the sensory dimension. For example, it's the need for touch, distinguishing people who need to touch products before purchasing them from the ones who don't care about the texture or the touch of the product before choosing. So we have cognitive, social, sensory dimensions covered by the 15 different scales. We did the study in France. We interviewed a national representative sample of respondents on this affect intensity scale, and we found 38% of people showing a high level of affect, meaning that 38% of people live their emotions very intensely. And what is interesting is that those people, they are very sensitive to products, and they are looking for sensations. So they will appreciate products which are very stimulating, which show complex sensations. For example, they will like a product with a complex texture or with a new flavor. And on the contrary, those high affect people, they will really dislike a product if it shows an unpleasant sensory characteristic. So those people, they are very discriminant from a sensory point of view. This is an extra, let's say, module that you can plug in a product test. You have the different products from the industrial tested, and after the product test, you can add those, let's say, psychological scales, and then you cross the results from those psychological scales with the results from the product test to try to highlight psychological drivers of liking or of choice. There are different situations. Let's say the first situation is if you want to explore your target as an industrial, you don't really know how the consumers who like your products are from a psychological point of view. Well, you can plug those skills at the end of the test and then try to explain the main drivers of these targets. But you can be in another situation where you know more about the psychological drivers of your target. You already have done, let's say, the study before, and you want to have those people, for example, you want to recruit specifically for a focus group or for a qualitative test, people who have a high level of affect or people who have a high need of touch, because you want to investigate a texture in the product you are developing. So you will use this tool as a screening tool. Like you would screen on age or gender, you can also screen people according to their psychological characteristics, let's say. We are using not every day, but because we have to convince our customers that psychological tendencies are one extra information in understanding their targets. But more and more we are plugging those skills in our product tests, either in labs or at home. So it becomes more common to understand that psychological traits can explain choices in a store, for example, or in a self-service restaurant. Why at a buffet you choose more this salad or this chicken, etc. Well, psychological drivers can explain some choices. So we are using it more and more with our customers. Well, we never proposed the 15 skills altogether. Because it would really be too long and not relevant, because there are some skills that are not for food, they are for cosmetics or for car industry. So we select before the test with our customers the relevant skills, so the skills they think could explain preferences of their consumers, and we ensure that answering those psychological skills does not take more than 20 minutes in total. I would really recommend validating the translated skills. So first you translate from English to the language you want to investigate, and then you make some statistical analysis to ensure that those skills are consistent in the final language. And that's what we saw when doing the translation from English to French. Sometimes, or most of the time, we had some skills that were not exactly understood in the same way with French respondents, and then we had to reformulate some sentences or to remove ones. So I would really recommend having this validation step. Well, there were some surprises, but there were also some answers I was expecting. For example, I found that I was a high affect intensity person, but I already knew that I was very emotional. And then there were some skills that more surprised me, like the need for touch skill, for example. I found that I was someone who needed to touch products before purchasing them, but not for getting useful information about the product itself, and more for a hedonic purpose, let's say, because I like touching things before choosing and purchasing. So this really was a new outcome for me. Well, our plans are to, let's say, to validate those skills in other countries, because more and more customers are interested in using this tool for big usage and attitude studies, where they can plug some psychological skills on top of, let's say, usual skills they have, like consumption, attitude skills. Those psychological skills would be a plus, and they're interested in Asian cultures. So we are looking for validation in those countries. And another development orientation is also to have other new scales included in our tool. For example, we don't have at the moment any scale differentiated people who give importance to sound, for example. We have scales for food, for odor, for touch, for aesthetics of the products, but not for sound. And we feel sound can also be important and has to be taken into account. So we have some other scales that we want to investigate. Thank you very much, Fabienne.